Elmer McCurdy was a lousy outlaw, but he made one heck of a corpse. This week, we'll look at his unfortunate life and remarkable. I'm Alan Brill. Welcome to Brilliant, a podcast from the mind of Brill. Warning, it gets dark in here. Our first story in the Weird Files this week's, we learned that swallowing frogs may be a bad idea. This comes from the dailymail.co.uk, October 8th, 2025. A Chinese woman, identified simply as Zhang, was admitted to the hospital suffering from severe abdominal pain. The doctors were baffled at the cause until, reluctantly, the woman admitted to swallowing several live frogs. She did this as a folk remedy to treat pain from a herniated disc. Without saying why, she had her relatives collect small frogs for her. She swallowed 3 one day and then 5 the next. Armed with this information, the doctors were able to trace the pain to a parasitic infection. A spokesperson for the hotel said, swallowing frogs has damaged the patient's digestive system and resulted in some parasites being present in her body, including sparginum. As actually a spokesperson for the hospital, not the hotel. She was deemed parasite-free and discharged after 2 weeks of treatment. Our second story features a racoon rampage. This comes from fox6now.com, 15 December 2025. At 7:30 p.m., a raccoon crashed through the ceiling of the packed Restaurante Bersago in Grand Geneva, Wisconsin. It landed in the middle of an occupied table, instantly wreaking havoc. The large and aggressive raccoon then tore through the restaurant, quote, brawling, scratching, and hissing, end quote. One of the panicked guests attempted to grab the rampaging critter and was bitten severely. Finally, police officers arrived, accompanied by Matt Snorick of Guaranteed Gone Animal Control, who captured the raccoon with a dog catcher's pole. Sadly, the animal was taken to a vet where it was euthanized and tested for rabies. Now we're going to hear about Elmer McCurdy, who was a terrible outlaw, but a fantastic corpse. Elmer McCurdy's life is remarkable only because of his incompetence as an outlaw. He was born in 1880 and began his outlaw career at 31 years old with a bang. In the March of 1911, along with 3 other outlaws, Elmer stopped a train on the Iron Mountain, Missouri Pacific Line, reportedly carrying $4,000. McCurdy rigged the safe and, well, he used a little too much nitroglycerin and destroyed all the money in the blast. Then they tried to rob a bank in Kansas, only this time, instead of just destroying the money, he managed to destroy the entire interior of the bank. His final crime occurred in October of that year in Okesa, Oklahoma. McCurdy and his gang had designs on robbing a train carrying $400,000. It was a good plan, only they robbed the wrong train car. They robbed the passenger car instead of the car that was actually carrying the money. So rather than $400,000, they made off with $46 they stole from the mail clerk, a few bottles of whiskey, and the conductor's watch. A newspaper at the time stated that the take was, quote, one of the smallest in the history of train robbery. Well, McCurdy then went to a friend's ranch to drown his sorrows, possibly with a newly purloined bottle of whiskey. But using bloodhounds, 3 sheriffs tracked him down to a barn on the ranch where McCurdy was sleeping it off in the early hours of October 7th. The October 8th, 1911 issue of the Daily Examiner quoted Sheriff Bob Fenton as saying, it began just about 7 o'clock. We were standing around waiting for him to come out when the first shot was fired at me. It missed me, and he turns attention to my brother Stringer Fenton. He shot 3 times at Stringer, and when my brother got under cover, he turned his attention to Dick Wallace. He kept shooting at all of us for about an hour. We fired back every time we could. We do not know who killed him. On the trail, we found one of the jugs of whiskey that was taken from the train. It was empty. He was pretty drunk when we rode up last night. And so ended the short, misspent life of Elmer McCurdy. But his story was not yet finished. McCurdy's body went unclaimed, and Undertaker Joseph L. Johnson embalmed his corpse with an arsenic-based preservative, gave him a shave, dressed him in a suit, and displayed him in the back of his funeral home. After a while, rather than just having poor Elmer take up space, Johnson decided to put him to work. He dressed the mummy in street clothes and put a rifle in his hands and made a sign proclaiming him to be the bandit who wouldn't give up, a reference to his failed robberies. He charged folks a nickel to gawk at the poor outlaw. Now, McCurdy's mummy actually became so popular that carnival owners soon made offers to buy Elmer, but Johnson refused to sell him. Until one day, two men showed up claiming to be McCurdy's brothers and requested the body so they could give him a proper burial. Thinking that this was the decent thing to do, Johnson released the body to the men to take back home. As it turns out, the two men weren't McCurdy's kin, but rather they were the Patterson brothers of the great Patterson Carnival shows. They rechristened McCurdy as the outlaw who would never be captured alive and displayed him in a traveling circus. In 1922, Patterson sold his circus to Louis Sawney, who then featured the mummy in his traveling museum of crime. In 1928, McCurdy once again changed hands when he became part of the sideshow of the Trans-American Foot Race. The Trans-American Foot Race was a multi-day race. It began at Legion Ascot Speedway in Los Angeles and ended in New York City at Madison Square Garden. Andy Payne won the event in 573 hours, 4 minutes, and 34 seconds, but it had like a traveling bus that broadcast the different stages of the race, and it had traveling sideshow, which among its exhibits, Elmer McCurdy. Now, McCurdy then began his acting career in 1933 when he was exploited by Dwayne Esper in his film Narcotic. He started displaying him in the lobby of the theaters as the body of a dead dope fiend. Esper claimed that he had been gunned down by police after robbing a drugstore to support his habit. Now, by this time, McCurdy's skin had shriveled and hardened. He's starting to actually look like the mummy that he was. And, he's more mummy than embalmed corpse. But Esper claimed that his appearance was due to drug use. Elmer was then put into storage until 1964, when he was lent to filmmaker David F. Friedman for his movie She-Freak, which was released in 1967. In 1968, his body, along with some other wax figures, it wasn't just him, it was like a lot deal, was sold to the Hollywood Wax Museum. Then McCurdy got a gig at a show at Mount Rushmore, but his body was damaged during a storm. It was a windstorm, and it blew off the tips of his ears, fingers, and his toes. I don't know why his toes were exposed to be blown off, but they were. And what was left was deemed too gruesome, and not lifelike enough to display. So then he was sold to the Pike Amusement Park in Long Beach, where he worked until 1976. He had almost hit the big time. Now he's delegated back to this small amusement park. And after languishing away in the small-time show business for several years, his big break was about to come. In December of 1976, the crew of the $6 Million Man TV series was filming scenes for the episode titled Carnival of Spies. This could be McCurdy's return to the big time. But while he was hanging from a makeshift gallows, one of the crew decided to move him out of the way, and his arm broke off, and exposed bone and human tissue. Clearly, this was not a mannequin. The police were called, an autopsy was performed, and they found a ticket stub for Louis Sawney's Museum of Crime in his mouth, of all places, and that's actually how they tracked him down. They contacted Louis's son, Dan, who confirmed McCurdy's identity. So McCurdy actually made more headlines dead than he ever could have dreamed of in life, and funeral homes were now offering to bury him for free. Eventually, he was shipped back to Oklahoma, and on April 24th, 1977, a funeral procession took McCurdy to the Boot Hill section of the Summit View Cemetery in Guthrie, Oklahoma, and his graveside service was attended by over 300 people. And to prevent people from robbing his grave, 2 feet of concrete was poured over his casket, which is, an honor usually reserved for famous outlaws, where people would steal their bones, much like Billy the Kid would be a great example. And so he's keeping good company. McCurdy, at last, had made the big time. So yeah, not a very unremarkable criminal life and life in general, but what an amazing afterlife. Get celebrity status and the fame he always wanted. He just, wasn't alive to see it. And then you can read about McCurdy's mummy and lots of other really cool, interesting stuff in Cowboys and Monsters by John LeMay. Again, quote this book quite often. Love it. Fantastic book. Fantastic source. And that's where I source most of the material for the story. Researchers at Tel Aviv University have determined that animals react to sounds made by plants. Now, these sounds are generally inaudible to most humans, but they can be heard by insects, bats, and even some mammals. The research team determined that moths would not lay their eggs on tomato plants that were emitting a sound associated with distress, which could perhaps indicate that the plant isn't healthy. Professor Yossi Yovel says, quote, "This is the first demonstration ever of an animal responding to sounds produced by a plant. This is speculation at this stage, but it could be that all sorts of animals will make decisions based on the sounds they hear from plants, such as whether to pollinate or hide inside them or eat the plant," end quote. Now, this experiment was closely controlled. They were definitely responding to sounds and not the appearance of the plant or other chemical indicators. And now they're studying to see what kind of different sounds plants might make. Professor Yovel says, quote, "You can think it could be many complicated interactions, and this is the first step. Plants could evolve to make more sounds or louder ones if they are of benefit to it, and the hearing of animals may evolve accordingly so that they can take in this huge amount of information. This is a vast, unexplored field, an entire world waiting to be discovered," end quote. Now, he stresses he's not claiming that plants are in any way sentient, just that they emitted sounds in response to environmental stimuli. I mean, talking plants, that's pretty cool. Hold on. What? I was getting ready to tell him. I'll let him know. It says keep it weird. Hey, thanks for dropping by the Black Barn here in pre-apocalyptic America for another Tour of the Strange. If you like this episode and you haven't already, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing. That would really help. And I ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. I reckon I'll shut it down for this week, folks, but I'll be back next week with another strange offering. So until then, keep it weird out there, y'all.